a better look at the downtown region, particularly south of 630. This is a rich opportunity. There's plenty of empty lots. There's plenty of houses there to restore, and there's ongoing efforts in that area. If the city would turn more of their capital improvement funds into that area, there's a very easy way to create affordable housing and take control of it as the developers come in by making incentives hooked to affordable housing. And that's one way that we can get to the source of the problem. It's just spend our dollars where we get the biggest bang for our buck. Thank you.
Next question from Sheila Miles.
Is this a follow-up question?
Yes.
Okay. Today, City Public Works money is allocated equally among 7 wards, despite the fact that older neighborhoods have longer list of repair needs. Would you support shifting to spending on a priority needs basis?
Dr. Johnson.
Well, I think you already know my answer to that. I've stated it several times, so I'll explain how my position was when we had that tax that I worked on. What I tried to get the board to do is basically say, look, this is a regressive tax, and so what you should be doing is putting the money where the people pay the most money out of their income. So it should be allocated by percentage of income that you're paying out of the sales tax. Now, somebody living out on the ranch out in Forest County, they pay that $500,000, $1,500 a year in extra taxes. It's nothing to them. But someone who has a $24,000 income, that's a lot of money out of their income. So yes, I've always promoted the fact that we should be taking this money and putting it where the people are having to invest the most money of their income at. And furthermore, it's just a better investment. If you put money in downtown or out on the ranch, you're not going to get near the recovery from it that you will if you put it in south of 630. So yes, I support the allocation of those funds to where they're needed. Thank you.
Mr. Ferguson.
I think it's a good question. You know, my dad earned his living as a journalist in Benton, and he used to cover the city council, and he said, you know, I go to these city council meetings, and I think that, you know, they say Ward 4 is going to get 100,000 pounds of horse manure. The rest of the wards want 100,000 pounds of horse manure because they want to get what the others are getting. You know, I said less ego, more civility, less ego, more love. Directors are paid to make hard decisions. The thing is that we have to answer to the ballot box, and so that's why people are reluctant to take a stand. I think that we need to have directors be willing to look is what is to the common good and long-term sustainability and growth and health of our city for future generations. So I am not opposed to the shifting of funds.
Director Fortson.
When the capital improvement tax was passed, the money is allocated equally among the 7 wards, except 10% of the total is reserved for any citywide project or projects in any ward that might deserve more than just that amount. So there's already been some reallocation of part of that money. It's a difficult thing to try to take care of all of our needs because when we passed that tax, we had neighborhood meetings where we asked people to tell us what was wanted, what was needed in their area. We came up with slightly more than $700 million worth of really worthwhile projects, curbs and guttering, and despite some popular ideas, they're scattered throughout the city, although I agree the greater needs are in the inner city, the older part of our city. To find a way to take care of all of those with the money available was just absolutely impossible. We have tried to apportion to the greatest needs as easily as we can, as quickly as we can, with the money we have at this time. And there are 4 more years left in this spending panel.
Next question, Whitney Patterson.
What would you recommend to control substandard properties belonging to absentee landlords or those who constantly skirt the law and tie up properties that remain in limbo before, if ever, improvements are made?
Mr. Ferguson.
You know, I'm going to be completely candid. I'm not familiar with the intricate details of the current code on this issue. I do know that folks need to be held responsible. I think that if you've got a city in which citizens cannot be assured when they go to rent a house that it's not going to be up to the safe standards for their children and their family, then there needs to be some penalties imposed. How you hold them accountable as you go forward is something that I think there needs to be discussions about. But I would certainly not be opposed to penalties and maybe even keeping them from being able to rent properties for quite some time, suspend their ability to do so.
Dr. Johnson?
This is a very difficult issue, and this is one where I have sympathy with the board on it, because it entails a great deal of legality that has to do with ownership and taxation, et cetera, that has to go through the state and the county. And so it's very difficult for the city to get a handle on this if it's outside their realm with the county and the state. The state actually, few years back, passed a statute that shortened the time that required for you to take over the property from a missing landlord or a missing owner. I'm burdened with experience with this, because when I was recovering my neighborhood, there was one house on my street like this, and there was a house behind me like this, and it took years to get it under control. So you're basically going to have to go to the state and the county to get this thing straightened out. In the meantime, all the city can do is try to maintain the property and keep holding the ownerships or the title holder to the cost of maintaining that property until they can get their hands on it. Thank you.
Director Fortson?
Well, as Clayton Johnson has mentioned, there's so much of this is a legal problem. We have city ordinances and city code inspectors who can cite people, we can fine them, but as far as taking them to the next step, we do not have the arbitrary authority, because property rights are still protected in this country. We do not have the arbitrary authority to go to the next step. It then becomes part of the legal process, and the city attorney then has to file a legal action to try to remove an owner or to remove property from an owner and condemn it. And that is a long process. Generally, if they want to appeal it, it may take 6 months to 18 months to get possession of that property. But we are currently doing quite a few of those. If you follow city board meetings, we'll have 8 to 10 condemnations each month. And we then institute legal proceedings to take over that property and get those people out of our city.
Okay, closing statements. Dr. Johnson?
What I just want to make sure is go back to my original listing of qualifications for the job. And basically, it's in leadership, first in leadership. My leadership has been trained in the trenches of neighborhoods and civic activity. I basically have worked at neighborhood level and in city and neighborhood issues for my entire time, my civic activity and career. I basically work neighborhood, I work with the county a little bit in the state, but mostly my activities are oriented in the neighborhood, and I'm more concerned that the neighborhoods are the things that have to be built up. And then you worry about the river, downtown and river market. They're valuable commodities, but we need to make sure that we take care of our neighborhoods at the same time. Like I said before, as jobs, I have 20 years, more than 20 or 30 years experience in technology, and as we've been saying in the city now, the new direction is higher paying, highly skilled technology jobs. And I feel I'm the most qualified to be able to move the city forward in that area. Public safety, I've been working on this for decades now. And right now, we're working on the police being fully staffed, but the problem with that is they haven't been fully staffed since the year 2000. So I'm not sure what ferry's going to come in and get us fully staffed in the next 2 or 3 years. Public and quality of life, as I said, I work at the neighborhood level. I work with issues on coalition. I was basically really good at neighborhoods coming into me with difficulties the city couldn't resolve. And I would basically find a way to slow that down so that whoever was creating the problem would listen to them. And as I finally said in service, I'm probably the most qualified person up here to work with our problems in education in the city, because I've had 20 or 30 years of higher ed and K-12 experience, and I'm working in the heart of the problem of the city. That's where I do my time. So I think I'm more qualified than anybody up here on all the issues that we're discussing. And I ask for your vote on November 8th. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Ferguson?
A little bit about me as we wrap up. You know, currently I mentioned earlier that I'm a pastor and a clinical chaplain, but let me give you a little bit of background about me. My first job out of college is I went to Washington, D.C. with President Bill Clinton. I was an appointee in his administration, so I'm familiar with how the federal government works, the state government works, and the partnerships that combined. As far as local government, I work for the Central Arkansas Planning and Development District in Lone Oak, which covers Lone Oak, Monroe, Prairie, Pulaski, Faulkner, and Saline counties. So I have worked in the past with municipalities on water and sewer issues, drainage issues, solid waste issues, so I'm no stranger to how city government works. I also have worked in finance. I figured out if I was going to stay in public service, I needed to figure out how money worked. So I went and got licensed as a security broker, and I was a defined pension contribution specialist, such as 401ks, 403bs, et cetera. I wanted to be someone who learned how to seek out the truth and get their source. I was a journalist and learned how to find information and do research so that when I make a case, I know what I'm talking about, and that includes asking questions. And that means checking with other folks and making sure that their answer is accurate. I've worked as, it's a dirty word sometimes in politics, but I've worked as a grassroots political strategist, which is a long way of saying that I was a grassroots lobbyist. And one of the things that you need to understand if you're going to be in public service is how things work behind the scenes. The last thing I would want to mention to you is that, yes, I'm a pastor, and that comes out of a love for people. I mentioned earlier that I think we need more love and less ego in our political process from the top federal, state, local level. And I think part of that is being more civility, and that means getting folks involved in the civil process. I need to hear from folks, and I think those on the board need to continue asking questions. What can we do to help you flourish and not fester? Thank you.
Director Fortson.
First, First, I'd like to thank the coalition for holding this forum this morning, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate. I am the incumbent, and I'm running for re-election based upon my record. I love this city. I've spent a lifetime here. I grew up here. My children are here, and all of my grandchildren are here. I'm very invested in the future of this city. I have a lifetime of service in executive management. I've served in public positions, 10 years on the Municipal Airport Commission, and I've served on this city board. My priorities remain the same. Strong neighborhoods, because strong neighborhoods make a strong city. Public safety improvements, because public safety makes for quality of life. And quality of life improvements, because that's how we live when we're not working. Those are the things that I espouse for this city. Those are the things that I would like to see accomplished, and why I'm asking for a return to this office. I have been endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, by the Little Rock Firefighters, by the organization ASCME, which represents the non-uniform workers, and by the Central Arkansas Labor Council. I don't always vote with those organizations, but they've endorsed me because they recognize my understanding and my grasp of city issues, and the fact that I have a record of being fair and supportive of the needs of this entire city. I ask for your support and your vote in continuing in this office. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you this morning and look forward to seeing you on Election Day, November 8th.
Intermission. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson, Dr. Johnson, and Director Fortson. Hello, everybody. Director Adcock, if you can give us an opening statement.
Yes. My name is Joan Adcock. I'm a Little Rock City Director, position 10. I've been a city director for 24 years, and I'm running for re-election. My background is I spent 27 years in retail sales, and I think anyone would agree that retail sales qualifies for a good qualification for a city director, because you have to learn to help people, to serve people, and good community skills. I then did the Hope Center for 14 years. The Hope Center was welfare to work. With that, we removed 1,500 women off of welfare and 51 men. It wasn't that we discriminated against men, but it was that you had to be the custodial parent, and there was very few men raising their children. And now I work part-time. My daughter has her own business, and I am her bookkeeper and her administrative assistant. When she was a teenager, she had to work in the store for Mother, and so now she says Mother has to pay her back. So I'm doing my payback right now. I'm a widow. My husband passed away last year. I have 2 children, and I have 10 grandchildren. Yes, my son has 7 children. He's an OB/GYN doctor in Joplin, Missouri. And he also now has 4 grandchildren, so now I have 4 great-grandchildren. I serve on different, in the city board, you choose some of the areas that you have a interest in, and you serve as a liaison on those committees. And I serve with the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Little Rock Animal Village Advisory Board, the Land Bank, the City of Little Rock, the City of Faith Citizens Advisory Board, working together in the community group, and also with Neighborhoods USA. My passion, if I was going to tell you what I really enjoy, and that is housing. I'm very concerned with all the boarded up housing. We have around 600 in this city. And I can wake up at night and dream about what I would do with those 600 houses. And finally, this year, we do have a pilot program that's addressing boarded and abandoned houses. The mayor and city manager has given me a pilot program where I'm looking at 6 houses in the Love neighborhood. And what we think is if you look at these 6 and can clean up the title, then we can move this throughout the city, cleaning up titles. And that is the biggest problem with the boarded and abandoned houses. Aunt May died, and she had 10 grandchildren. She had 10 heirs, and those heirs had 10 heirs, and now half of them are dead. And it's how do we go about clearing title on properties? Heirs is one problem. Another problem is that banks have liens on these properties. We had one that had a $3,000 child support lien, and we have been able to work through that one. So I feel like that once we address the needs of clearing all these titles, then we can move to other neighborhoods.
Time.
We regret that Molly Miller is not present, but we are going to go ahead with our question. First question comes from Whitney Patterson.
The proposed I-30 project would lead to widening I-630, state officials say, and the neighborhoods, especially to the south, could suffer yet another assault on the fragile stability there. What would you do to protect these neighborhoods from any ill effects of highway widening?
Well, according to the mayor, that has all been decided by the Metro Plan, and it will not be coming to the city board. But I see even whatever has been decided, that I have a place of making sure neighborhoods are protected. Some of the plans I saw had some beautiful parks in them. Some of them had over on the east side of town, making sure that we address an easy way to get across the bridge, because in the past we have had bridges that's divided us. And I think that what I want to do is say, okay, if this is a done deal and everything, then what can I do to make sure that we don't divide further the east side of town from downtown or from other parts of the area? And I think that when we look at the new area over there around this Sterling's place that is being rehabbed and everything, I think as you see more development over there, new development, that you're not going to see that divide that happened in other areas.
Next question, Sheila Miles.
Recently, city directors defeated a proposal to require new police officers to live in Little Rock. One reason cited was the lack of moderate income housing in the city that new officers could afford at their starting pay. What will you do to overcome this lack of housing?
Well, I think my pilot program is going to help that, Sheila, because, and another thing is the land bank. In the past, we have had the land bank only in 2 areas of the city. Although when Myra Jones and I went out to the legislature, we had envisioned the land bank to cover the whole city. And as 2 weeks ago, the Land Bank Commission voted to open it up to the whole city. And I think that's going to be one thing, because employees of the City of Little Rock can have land bank property at no cost. Teachers and people employed by the school district can have land bank property at no cost. So I think by opening that up and us starting to foreclose on properties where we have landlords that are not taking care of them and that we have been cleaning and everything, we can now foreclose on those properties and take them into the land bank. So I think that will help people get housing that is affordable.
Next question, Whitney Patterson.
Arkansas is the only state without a law setting a warrant of habitability standard for rental units. Do you support state legislation to require a warrant of habitability from landlords setting minimum health and safety standards for rentals?
Yes, I do. I worked with the Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhoods back in the 90s, and we got rental inspection. And rental inspection has been up and down. I think if we ever had enough employees to really carry out what we had planned under rental inspection, we would see a tremendous difference. But I do support anything to clean up rental housing in the city. I was just talking to a gentleman outside while waiting on you, and he was talking about in his neighborhood how bad the rental property is. And I took notes for him, and I plan Monday morning to be calling on the notes that he has given me, because this is a problem in our city, and it's a problem in our state, and it needs to be addressed. And the best way to address it is with the state law.
Next question, Sheila Miles.
How would you support the 12th Street Quarter Jump Start program? Really, redevelopment and quality of life issues in the surrounding neighborhoods.
Well, I think that, again, I think the answer to this is a lots of rental inspection. I think a lots of it is code enforcement. But the biggest problem is that around the 12th Street corridor is the vacant and abandoned houses. In Little Rock, we have around 632 vacant abandoned houses and 7,000 weed lots. And the biggest percentage of those is in the area that you're talking about. So I think that once we learn how to handle these abandoned and vacant houses, we can get them into home ownership. Because as a city rehabs a house, we'll do it with a private contractor. But as we rehab it, it would go to an owner for the cost that we put into the rehab of it. So they should be very, very affordable. And I think you will see, once we clean up the neighborhoods around it, I'm sorry that the residents do not feel that the police substation on 12th Street really was the benefit that they thought it was going to be. But I think that we need to keep trying other things, particularly in the housing area, to clean up the adjoining neighborhoods.
Next question, Whitney Patterson.
No.
I don't think so. We've only asked 3 questions, so we're on question 4.
No, this is 4. No, we've asked you.
Ron, excuse me, Ron, escort Cappy down to the conference room, please.
This we've done 4. So I'm gonna.
I beg your pardon. Then this would be follow-up question number 1.
The city rental inspection program fails to visit all rental housing in Little Rock every 2 years as the law requires. Recently, all 34 inspector positions were filled, yet tenants are not getting better conditions, and leaky roofed homes get inspected and approved. What further steps will you take to assure decent housing in Little Rock?
I think that one thing we have to do is understand that, according to City Attorney Tom Carpenter, you can't just go after the bad ones. You have to have a systematic program where you're inspecting all of them. And I think somehow or other we need to look at that and address it. And if we have to go to the legislature, do it. Because it takes so many hours for these big apartment complexes out west. So they go out there and they do those, and that time could be spent on really addressing the needs in the inner city. But I think until we have that question answered with the city attorney, we're going to see so many hours being spent on buildings that are brand new or just about new. And we need to concentrate on areas. I would like to see us take areas of the city, because we know where the bad housing is. I mean, it's not a secret to people where the bad housing is, and we know where it is. And that needs to be addressed very thoroughly before we start addressing housing in other areas. In Southwest Little Rock, you have 25 mobile home parks, and we have been working on those. I've been concerned because over a year now, the city board has been being told, we're going to inspect the inside, we're going to inspect the insides, and yet that hasn't happened.
Time.
Next question, Sheila Miles.
Today, City Public Works money is allocated equally among 7 wards, despite the fact that older neighborhoods have longer lists of repair needs. Would you support shifting to spending on a priority needs basis?
No, I would not. We looked at that when we started this. And we had lots of conversations about it and lots of discussion about it. And although some of those areas are more fluid and everything, it seems like they still have some needs. Now, when we get to the last 3 years, this coming year, there may be some adjustments to that. But in starting out, everyone had needs. Everyone pays the taxes. And if you look at a lot of our other programs, for instance, CDBG, that money cannot be spent on some of the neighborhoods and some of the wards that you're talking about. So the wards that you're talking about with more needs has the CDBG money, and they have other funding. Most of the demolition, I think 80% of the demolition money for housing goes to Ward 1.